If you want to stop feeling like you're being left behind in your 30s or 40s, you really need to focus on the next step and not the journey. It's about each little step along the way, not the end goal. And too many people get caught in this chase of chasing the big dream or the big outcome, the big achievement. And what happens is you get so far ahead of yourself that you don't take the time to actually grow and go through the process of really reaching and obtaining those goals that you set out for yourself.
Welcome to Under Pressure, the podcast about becoming better men when it counts. I'm Cody Laughlin.
And I'm Brian Alfaro. Each week, we have honest conversations about building businesses, leading families, carrying responsibility, and the pressure that comes with trying to do all of it well. If that sounds like your world, you're in the right place.
No hype, no pretending we've got it all figured out, just real stories, real struggles, and what we're learning along the way. Let's get into it.
Before we get started, if today's topic resonates with you, you'll probably enjoy The Forge. It's our free weekly newsletter where we share lessons, stories, and practical ideas around business, family, responsibility, and becoming better men. You can join at forgingbettermen.com. Now let's get into it. Cody, have you ever caught yourself thinking, especially because you just turned 40, shout out to all the 40 years old, I thought I'd be further along in life now. Maybe it's in business, maybe it's in your career, maybe financially, maybe in your marriage or as a parent, and you find yourself looking around and feeling like other people are ahead of you?
Unfortunately, more than I care to admit. But the crazy thing is, I think that's true for a lot of men. And oftentimes men aren't feeling behind because they're failing. They're often feeling behind because they're comparing. They're comparing themselves to a timeline that they created years ago, or many times they're comparing themselves to somebody else's life entirely.
Cody, once that feeling creeps in, I find that you stop appreciating what you've worked so hard for and what you do have. The goalpost keeps moving and you end up chasing a finish line that you can never reach.
Today, we're going to talk about why so many men feel like they're falling behind, the cost of that feeling, and how to quit living in somebody else's shadow.
All right, Cody, so let's talk about some of those stories. Let's talk about some of those examples. What are some areas in your life where you would say you've had those moments, you've had those feelings of being behind when you compare yourself to others, or maybe where you thought you were going to be 10, 15 years ago?
The one that stands out to me and that's most personal to me right now is my financial plan and my wealth building plan. Similar to many others, starting out at a very young age in my healthcare career, I started to get this entrepreneurial bug and started going down this path. And part of that was this idea or this goal of creating a certain financial future for myself and my family. And over the years, I mean, I'm 40 now, shout out, I just turned 40. I'm officially over the hill now.
Congratulations.
So a lot of my friends and family are reminding me of that. Thank you. But, when I reflect back on what I've done over the last, say 20 years, nearly 20 years, financially, I just haven't been able to achieve the certain milestones that I had planned for myself years ago. I feel like I should be much further along in that financial journey than what I am. And that's due to a variety of different factors, some that we've shared on the show, some that I'm sure we'll talk about in future episodes. But, life is funny in a way. It has a way of humbling you and throwing you curveballs when you least expect it. And unfortunately, those circumstances lead into delays. And, I see other people my age and highly successful people that are doing some amazing things and have created some amazing wealth for themselves. And you see those guys and it's very hard not to compare yourself. It's very hard not to look at them and say, man, well, why does my journey look different than theirs? Or why is my situation look a lot different than theirs? And so that's the one that's closest to home for me. But what about you?
Yeah, I mean, definitely have some financial ones as well, but I want to go a different path. For me, the expectations that I had for myself stem from a lot of things that are parent related. So I'm 37 years old now. My daughter was born in 2024. She's almost 2. So I had my first kid at 35 years old, and I always wanted kids. I was somebody who always wanted kids as a 18, 19, 20-year-old. I was like, man, it's going to be awesome to have kids one day. I look forward to being a dad. But that happened much later than I expected at 35 years old. And it wasn't from a lack of trying. My wife had some medical complications that made it really complicated. we tried everything we could naturally to try to have a little one back in 2019, actually, which would have put me at, what is that, 2019? I would have been about 30 years old. But unfortunately, or 31, 32 years old. Unfortunately, my, God had a different plan for us, right? Life didn't go the way we thought we were. So we found ourselves, my wife and myself including, starting to compare ourselves to some of the friends that we had in our circle that were having kids. Her sister, for example, who's a little bit older, had 3 boys already that were growing very fast. And we had some friends in our circle that started to have little ones as well. And the big thing for you and I remember going to a lot of conferences with you, and you're making small talk with people, and almost everyone at these conferences and events is talking about their kids, talking to them, asking you that question. So how many kids do you have? Do you have any kids? And the answer was always no, don't have any kids yet, but trying, right? And there was always a little bit of pain when that question got asked. To be quite honest, when you're 32, 33, 34, and you're talking to somebody who I would say society expects you at that age to have a family, and you're saying no, there was always a little bit of pain that kind of came up every single time. It would move quickly, but every single time somebody asked me that question, it kind of hurt a little bit, kind of stung, right? So that was definitely a curveball in life that I wasn't expecting, was to have my first kid at such a, I wouldn't say I'm old, but an older age in life. We would have loved and wished to have our first little one in maybe very late 20s, or 30, 31. And my wife's 4 years younger than me, so she's still in a great position. But for me personally, I always never wanted to be that 65-year-old dad with an 18-year-old. Not that that's going to happen, but it was something that I always thought about, and it was something that kind of missed a mark on in life.
So going back then to your initial expectation, do you feel like, and I think I heard you mention this, but do you feel like that was maybe somewhat curated by social influence, or do you feel like that's just something that in your head, maybe you were raised to believe, or, what shaped some of those expectations in the beginning?
I think it's a mixture of personal expectations set for myself and societal pressures, for sure. There's a ton of data out there showing that most young adults are having kids much later in life. I don't know what the average age is for the first kid, but I know for housing, because obviously we pay close attention to the real estate market, the average first-time home buyer is in their mid-30s. That number's drastically up from 10 or 15 years ago, right? And we're not here to talk about real estate, but the same thing is happening with kids. The population's declining. The average family has less than 2 kids now, and people are focusing and prioritizing their careers over having kids. So it's very common to see people that have their first kid at 33, 34, 35. So even though I feel like I'm old and late, if you kind of look around in society, it's actually pretty normal. And we still have some friends that haven't had their first kid yet, or trying, or maybe they have a daughter or son that's the same age as my daughter. We counted at one time several months ago, I think there were 15 babies born in an 18-month period of my daughter. So society is telling me statistically that we're not behind, but I had these personal expectations for myself. Some of it probably stemmed from my parents had me and my sister at a young age, 18, 19, 20 years old. Not that I wanted to necessarily follow in the shoe, but there was that expectation. And then I went for a different story, but I had similar financial expectations for myself. I thought I was going to have this retire by 40, work optional by 40, 35. I think it was even like mid 30s. I told myself by 35, I don't want to be working for anyone. I want to be living the dream, yada, 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 right? And life just is much different than you realize, and things take longer than you realize. So I was thinking like, okay, if I'm, by mid 30s, I should have a family by then and be able to enjoy time with family. So it was definitely a mix of societal pressures, but also personal expectations. What about you with your financial? Would you say that was personal expectations for people around you, or were you looking around? You mentioned you were comparing yourself or seeing some other people in your circle that were, what you would say, ahead financially.
It started at home as a kid growing up. I think we've shared my story growing up in a household that was with 2 blue collar parents, 2 high school dropouts, but they worked their tails off. We had a great upbringing, but they had to work incredibly hard to give us the lifestyle that we had. And my parents were both very, very big on a formal education. In their minds, that was the true way to build a financial future, build wealth for yourself. Is you go to college, you get the degree, you start a career, and you save your money and so forth and so forth. I think that's a pretty typical playbook. And that's where that initial influence came from, was growing up with that mindset of, okay, I need to take these certain steps in order to put myself in a position financially to where I can get ahead. But what was interesting is after I started my career very early on, I started to realize that some of those teachings and some of those principles that I was raised on may not really be the true building blocks to wealth building, at least not what my understanding of it was. And as I began to, again, learn more about entrepreneurship and learn more about the opportunities out there that are outside of just a typical W-2 and working as an employee, my influence then began to shift and being shaped by other people, other successful people that were following down the path that I was hoping to go down. And that's where some of those comparisons started to come from. It was, I hate to say I was deviating from the principles I was raised on, but it was a shift to more of social influence than it was the personals.
I think that's a good transition point to talk about why do we feel behind. And you said something a second ago about society and social pressure. I think it's a fair argument to make that a lot of people in our stage in life, early mid 30s, early mid 40s, we are now exposed to something that maybe our parents didn't have back then, and that's social media. There are thousands and millions of influencers that are on social media. You see these 20-year-olds talking about how they've got millions of dollars and they're driving these Lamborghinis and they're at these places in New York and Chicago or whatever. And if you're 40 years old and you're scrolling through your timeline and you see a 20-year-old who has all the things you maybe hoped you had had at this point, it's hard to, unless you're looking at life with a certain paradigm and you can kind of call BS when you see it, it's hard to not fall into that trap of comparison, because society is constantly putting that pressure on us based on what we see, and whether we like it or not. Back to our primal instincts, we're always going to look around and compare ourselves as men, especially, to other men that are in our society. So as far as why we feel behind, I think that societal pressure and that, highlight reel lifestyle that we sort of see on social media contributes a big factor to these feelings.
I think some of the other variables that you may see is sometimes we get addicted to achievement when we're constantly looking for the next goalpost, so to speak, or the next milestone or the next big win. What happens is we create a scenario where we're so addicted to hitting that big goal that it never stops. It creates this never-ending wheel, so to speak, of just always trying to get the next best thing, the next best win, the next best thing. And it creates this unrealistic pressure on yourself that you're never achieving enough, or you're never doing enough, or that you're never getting far enough ahead. And like we've already mentioned, if you're already comparing yourself and you're already being influenced by what others are doing, and maybe you're seeing some of their successes and some of their achievements, it only mentally changes your mindset, and it really negatively impacts you in the way of, again, just always feeling like you constantly have to continue to push the needle, move chase the next milestone.
And that's not enough.
And that's not enough. And it's not healthy either. It's not healthy. We talk about the feeling of feeling behind, but that can play a huge impact on your mental psyche.
I think the biggest damage it causes too, in my experience personally, when I go through those little rocky moments, is I stop being grateful for what I have. You see people on social media, or you compare yourselves to there's that saying, keeping up with the Joneses, and they have a 2026 car and you're driving a 2024 car, and you're like, man, I wish I had a 2026 car. It's like, no, man, like, you have a pretty awesome car. There are people all over the world that wish they had a 2-year-old car, but we start to lose focus on what is important in our life and realizing that we've already achieved a lot and we're not grateful for it. We stop being grateful for the little things in life. We stop being grateful for our family. We stop being grateful for the trips we're able to take. We stop being grateful for our job that we have. There are people that are unemployed out there that wish they had a job, but we're wishing we had a better job or made more money or got a promotion or whatever it might be. That toxicity that feeling brings, and the fact that it can really mask your ability to be grateful for things in the moment, is, I think, one of the most dangerous things about comparing yourself to others and feeling that I'm not good enough feeling.
I like the term that you use, the toxicity, because that's a great phrase for it. Because what happens is, we've shared this before in previous episodes, where the goal should not be the end point. It really should be the journey and the process you go through in becoming the man that you need to be to achieve those goals. And I think about me financially. you- if I had a financial plan 10 years ago to double my net worth, for example, and here I am 10 years later and I didn't hit it, maybe my net worth only increased by 50%. You can argue like, well, I didn't hit my goal. That's disappointing. I didn't do enough, whatnot. But I would argue that, well, wait a minute, your net worth still increased by 50%. That's pretty damn good. That's a lot better than you were 10 years ago. And I think it's important to make sure that you reflect on those every small win and along the way and those little milestones that you achieve, even though it may not be the big achievement that you were looking for, there's still growth that happens in between there. And that's really what's most important.
So that not feeling gratitude and the feelings that we're talking about here, what's unfortunate, and I've done this myself, and I see it amongst peers sometimes, is when we're comparing ourselves to others and we're lacking that gratitude for the things we have in life, we often start getting shiny object syndrome, or we start making desperate decisions. We maybe make bad investments because we think we're going to make up for being behind. If you feel like you should be at a certain place financially, you might see this business, franchise, stock, real estate investment and go, man, this is the one. This is the one it's gonna set me free. It's gonna help me achieve that goal that I thought I was going to achieve several years ago. And we go all in. We empty our savings, or we invest too much time into it and realize that we only made that decision in hindsight because we were comparing ourselves to others. We were comparing ourselves to the Jones, and we were hoping it was kind of a quick fix to get to where we wanted to be. And those desperate decisions that we make in that type of environment and that type of feeling psychologically, they rarely end up working out.
And there's other cost as well. There's cost to relationships, marriages, and family from just constantly feeling dissatisfied. If you're not celebrating those wins, if you're not taking those moments to reflect on again the positives in your life throughout your journey, and you allow yourself to be blinded to some of the successes that you have had. Right. It's maybe they're overlooked or they're overshadowed because in your mind, it may not be good enough or it wasn't the end goal. And because you lose that ability, or you limit yourself to being able to recognize those moments where you should be celebrating, it can make you a very bitter person, which in turn can damage relationships with those that are closest to you. In our case, our wives, our kids, and our family. And a lot of times what happens is it creates this almost need to have to do more and work more. And that also compounds on those damaged relationships, because then what happens? You start missing seasons. You start missing important things that matter to your family, that help keep your family unit intact. Those things all of a sudden aren't as important as, well, I got to get to the next best thing, or I got to get to, I got to work harder because I'm not there yet. And that's not what's most important. We lose sight of that in those moments where we start making those calls for, those decisions based on desperation or feelings of just bitterness. And ultimately that can turn out, it ends up leading into burnout, right? We end up getting burnout by the chase, the constant pursuit of reaching those goals, or reaching that point of feeling like we've made it, and in trying to balance outside variables like our relationships with our families. And that burnout, once you get to that point, I'm sure you've been there. I know personally I've been there. It's a very dark place to be, and it's very hard to come out when you get there. And for people, it's different. I know in my circumstance, burnout for me has lasted sometimes months at a time. So Brian, with that, let's talk about then how do we stop feeling like we're constantly behind or that we're falling behind? What are some things that you can advise our audience to maybe implement in their daily lives, their routine, to help them manage some of those feelings of just starting to get behind?
Step one for me was a long time ago, realizing that I need to define what my definition of success is. We can't let the world, we can't let society, we can't let our peers, the neighbors, the Joneses tell us what the definition of success is. We control our own destiny, and we can't play victim along the way. We have to take ownership of our actions. So defining what our version of success is in the future will help us lay out an action plan to achieve it. So that's really step one for me. And when you're defining success for yourself, I like to define success in multiple areas. Unfortunately, a lot of people define success strictly by financial means, how much money is in their bank account. But I like to look at it in 4 quadrants. My first definition of success is with my partner, my spouse. my relationship with my wife. What does that definition of success look like? My second one is with my family. What does my definition of success look like in my household, with my family, with my kids, anyone else that's under my household? My third area that I write a definition of success every year is in my business. What does success look like in business in 2026, in 2027, in 3 years, in 5 years? And then fourth, I like to look at personal things. So personal financial, what does success look like for there? How much savings do I have? What does my rainy day fund look like? How much investment capital do I have? How much cash flow are my investments generating? And last but not least, arguably a fifth bucket, but it still falls under personal, is with my health. I think we have to define what success looks like for our health, because what I found is if we focus too much energy on one bucket, or we focus on the other ones and we leave out managing our money, personal finances, and keeping a budget for things, or if we leave out our health, what's our ideal weight? How much, muscle should we have? What's our diet look like as we age? If we leave out what the definition of success looks like for there, we might have, a great at-home life and a happy wife and a bunch of money, but we might be, 100 pounds overweight, or we might have diabetes or a heart issue, or the other way around. Maybe we're super fit and super healthy, but our marriage is falling apart. So we have to define what our definition of success is. And usually once a year, what I do is I'll go and I'll set goals in each one of those buckets and define what does success look like for me in each one of those buckets every single year.
For me, I have two that I feel resonate really well with me, which is first, it's comparing backwards, not forward. And what that means is really reflecting on the progress that you've made throughout each aspect of your life, like you just said, financially, personally, fitness, health-wise, but really looking backwards, not forward. As you already know, as we all know, I can't predict what happens in the future. I don't know what's going to happen 5, 10 years from now. I have an idea or vision for what I want my life to look like 5, 10 years now. I had a vision for myself 10 years ago. But again, life is going to happen, and there's going to be so many things that you can't predict that are going to change your course. So for me, it's more important to really reflect on how am I different now versus where I was a year, 5 years, 10 years ago.
Progress.
And the progress over whatever future projection I feel I can make, because that's where real fulfillment is going to come from, when you can take the time to look and see how far you've advanced towards reaching certain goals that you maybe set out a few years ago. And it's that progress and that personal growth, that professional growth, whatever it is, that you're really going to find more fulfillment in and more enjoyment out of and satisfaction for. The second thing, if you want to stop feeling like you're being left behind in your 30s or 40s, you really need to focus on the next step and not the journey. It's about each little step along the way, not the end goal. And too many people get caught in this chase of chasing the big dream or the big outcome, the big achievement. And what happens is you get so far ahead of yourself that you don't take the time to actually grow and go through the process of really reaching and obtaining those goals that you set out for yourself. So for me, it's really important to focus on each step first and foremost as a primary focus versus looking at the bigger picture as a whole.
So I think if you're somebody who constantly feels like you're behind, no matter what age you're at, I think one of the tricks is to audit what you're doing on a daily basis, audit your inputs, and to look back over the course of 3 months, 6 months, a year, and realize that we need to actually measure our progress and not chase our destination towards the journey. If you're monitoring your inputs on a daily basis, in one of the buckets I mentioned, your health, your personal financial, your marriage, your business, all those categories we discussed, and you're auditing how much effort you're putting into each one of those, you're going to look back and realize I've put in a lot of time, I've put in a lot of effort, and I'm doing more than likely 90% better, or giving 90% more effort than the average person. And that's something to be proud of. And that's something that you can be grateful of when you're reflecting back on your journey and realizing that you're not actually behind. You're just taking all the necessary steps to get to your end goal.
These have been really great talking points, and it's been a really great discussion, but I really want to challenge our audience with some actionable items that they can really implement in their daily lives and help them work through maybe this feeling of feeling behind. So the first thing that I want to encourage our audience to do is do an evaluation of your own situation and ask yourself, where do you feel behind? What areas of your life are you really struggling to feel like you're meeting the moment or you're living in the moment? What are those areas that you really find yourself just challenged with that feeling of just, you're just lagging, you're falling behind? The second thing I would challenge our audience to do as well is do an evaluation of who you're comparing yourself to. Be honest with yourself and ask yourself, who are the people that are you allowing yourself to compare yourself to, attach yourself to, and be pressured or influenced by, whether they know it or not, and do some self-reflection. And the third thing I would encourage them to do is ask yourself, is that fair? Is it fair to you? Is it fair to your family? Is it fair to the people that you care about most that are in life with you every day? And ask yourself is it fair to put those expectations on yourself?
Definitely. And I think too, looking back and realizing, have you accomplished what you actually set out for? Have you accomplished maybe what you prayed for 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 10 years ago? We all have accomplished way more than we realize, but we get caught in this cycle, as we've discussed, about keeping up with the Joneses, comparing ourselves to people on social media. And even if you're not doing either one of those, men tend to have a natural innate obsession with just chasing things and being better at things in life and moving on to the next sort of bigger and better, kind of shinier object. But you have to stop to smell the roses. You have to stop and realize, wow, I've done a lot in my 35, 40, 45, 50 years of life. I have a beautiful family. I have a house. I have a car. I have a good job. I have a business that I own. I've impacted a lot of people in a positive way. I'm involved in my church. Those are all things to be proud of, that you should not be comparing yourself to other people because you've done a lot, right? You have to just stop and, like I said, stop and smell the roses and realize what you've done has been good. And last, I would sit down and ask yourself, what is one action you can take this week after they sit down, as you mentioned, and put down that list of things of, where do I feel behind? You can't tackle everything all at once. You know, there's that saying, you eat an elephant one bite at a time. So if there's an elephant in the room and a bunch of things that you're thinking about where you're comparing yourself to others, once you have that list put down, which one can I tackle this week? Which one can I tackle today? Which one are going to take me a little bit longer? And also being honest with yourself, but also giving yourself a little bit of grace. Realizing that if you have a business or you're an employee and you're working 40, 50 hours a week, you have a family, you have responsibilities at church, you have responsibility with your parents, you're not going to be able to just wave a magic wand and fix all these things. I use the word fix, but work on all these things all at once. You're going to have to put in slow progress, slow effort over time, and enjoy the journey of self-improvement. But figuring out what action can I take this week to make progress in this area is the first step in not feeling like you're behind and comparing yourself to others.
I think it's important as a takeaway message. Life, it's you against you. That's it. There's nobody else. It's you against you. So focus on yourself. Put these actionable items in play.
Yeah, and what's funny about what you said is you realize the older you get, you stop caring about what other people think. There's a certain point in life, and it's at a different point for everyone, where, and you see this all the time, kind of funnily, with like older people. People say, oh, old people, they don't care. They say what they want. They do what they want. They've lived enough life to know that it doesn't really matter what other people think, and that nobody is really comparing you to others except for yourself. It's all in your head. All the challenges we've talked about today with keeping up with the Joneses, comparing yourself to others, it's all in your head. There's nobody, your neighbor's not going to buy a new car just so they can say, I got a better car than that guy. You're the only one thinking about that. So get out of your own head, stop comparing yourself to others, and just focus on yourself.
Appreciate you being here with us. Stay connected by joining our weekly newsletter called The Forge, delivered straight to your inbox with thoughts on business, work, family, and becoming a better man. Make sure to check out forgingbettermen.com to sign up. If this show hits home for you, then hit the follow button and leave us a review to help us reach more guys who would benefit from it. This is Under Pressure.